Crowds do not think. They react. They do not weigh. They echo. They are not bound by reason, but by contagion. A single spark, a single gesture, a single word, uttered with enough force, can set thousands into motion. Those who pretend otherwise blind themselves to the simplicity of command. The ruler who understands this knows that power is not seized in the mind of the individual, but in the pulse of the collective. To master the crowd, one does not appeal to intellect. One appeals to the nerves. Symbols speak louder than logic. Rituals bind tighter than truth. And the illusion of unity commands more loyalty than any solitary conviction. Fear is the most reliable conductor of crowds. It unites enemies, dissolves doubts, and sharpens obedience. Offer them an enemy, visible or invisible, and they will march where you direct, even if the path leads into fire. Hope, too, has its place, but hope must be vague, a horizon that never arrives. Fear delivers action now. Hope delays rebellion until tomorrow. Loyalty is never natural. It is manufactured, engineered by appearances, by gestures of strength, by calculated rewards and punishments. A ruler who trusts in spontaneous devotion is already a corpse in waiting. Control is maintained by alternating reassurance with menace, so the crowd feels both protected and endangered, never fully secure. Betrayal is inevitable, for individuals within the crowd will seek to rise above it. This is no tragedy, it is nature. Anticipate it, use it, transform betrayal into spectacle. A single public punishment instructs more than 1,000 private rewards. Mercy has its moment, but terror leaves deeper marks. Crowds crave theater. They want to be deceived, for deception spares them the burden of thought. A ruler does not tell them truth. A ruler gives them a story in which they can lose themselves. Truth without ornament is ignored. Illusion wrapped in grandeur becomes sacred. To govern is not to lecture, but to stage. Control requires patience. Impulses move the crowd, but strategy tames it. You must know when to ignite passion and when to cool it. Too much fervor and it turns against you. Too little and it drifts into apathy. The art is in balance, like a general who advances not when the troops are ready, but when the enemy is weakest. Ambition fuels rulers, but ambition alone consumes them. What preserves power is the cold acceptance that the crowd will never love you as they claim. They will cheer today and condemn tomorrow, worship in the morning and curse by nightfall. Their voice is wind, their loyalty is tide, their memory is dust. Thus the wise ruler does not seek permanence in their affection, but permanence in control. Build institutions that bind them, rituals that shape them, fears that haunt them, myths that enthrall them. Leave them too entangled in your web to imagine life without it. This is the truth they don't want you to know. Crowds are not governed by wisdom, but by forces older than thought, fear, hunger, envy, pride. To control them is not sorcery, but the patient use of human nature against itself. And the ruler who sees this clearly, without illusion, commands not only the crowd, but fate itself. The crowd is restless because it is shapeless, and what is shapeless must cling to a form given from outside. It does not know where it goes until someone points the way, and once pointed, it rushes without pause, without reflection, believing the path was its own choice. The skilled ruler does not resist this nature, but bends it, guiding it with subtle hands, as a rider guides a horse with reins so light they appear invisible. Appearances of choice must always be maintained, for the crowd loves the illusion of freedom while begging for direction. Control lies in rhythm, not chaos. Disorder frightens the masses, yet too much order suffocates them. Thus, the ruler must alternate between allowing disarray and imposing structure, so that the people mistake necessity for generosity and coercion for stability. The pendulum becomes the heartbeat of power, never still, never final, always moving between fear and reassurance. The ruler cannot afford to speak in many voices, for the crowd despises complexity. They want clarity, even if it is false, certainty, even if it is hollow. The wise leader reduces 1,000 tangled realities into one clean narrative, repeated until it becomes indistinguishable from truth. Complexity is the domain of the few, simplicity is the currency of the many. And it is simplicity that moves armies, wins elections, and consolidates empires. The crowd remembers spectacles, not facts. What is written in books fades, but what is acted on a stage or broadcast across screens burns itself into their memory. Power belongs not to the most correct, but to the most theatrical. The ruler who grasps this uses ritual, ceremony, and performance, not as decoration, but as weapons sharper than steel. Applause becomes consent, and silence becomes submission. Those who lead must never underestimate envy, for envy corrodes more swiftly than hate. The people do not resent their own suffering as much as they resent the sight of others escaping it. A ruler who flaunts wealth will be despised. A ruler who cloaks power in modest gestures will be tolerated. Envy cannot be eliminated, but it can be directed away from the throne and toward convenient scapegoats. Thus, the flames are fed, but never at the foot of the ruler's own seat. Ambition in the crowd is dangerous if left unfocused. Every individual carries the seed of self-importance, and if they are not given outlets to exhaust it, they will aim it against the structure itself. Bread, festivals, causes, and rivalries are tools to drain their ambition into channels that do not threaten the center. The wise ruler allows the people victories that matter little, so they never think to challenge the victories that matter most. The tragedy of power is not in its cruelty, but in its necessity. To govern is to dirty one's hands, to act where others refuse, to make decisions that will always breed resentment. The ruler who hesitates for virtue will be devoured by those who do not hesitate. Thus, necessity is the higher law. It excuses what would otherwise be condemned, and it forgives nothing to those who fail to obey it. Every ruler, no matter how beloved, will one day face betrayal. This must never come as surprise, for betrayal is as natural to politics as gravity is to the earth. Friends betray for gain, enemies for revenge, allies for opportunity. To be betrayed is not failure, to be unprepared for it, island. Therefore, the ruler survives not by eliminating betrayal, but by anticipating it, making examples of it, and ensuring that fear outweighs the lure of treachery. Power endures not in the words of rulers, but in the structures they leave behind. A man may die, but a system can persist for centuries if it is built upon fear, ritual, and necessity. The ruler must always build beyond the span of his own life, crafting mechanisms that will move without him, ensuring that even in absence his shadow governs. The crowd must never believe they can live without the order imposed, for once they do, the edifice crumbles. And so the art of rule is not a mystery. It is the most human of sciences, stripped of illusions, laid bare by necessity, shaped by instincts as old as survival itself. The crowd is not free. It does not want to be free. It wants to be led, to be deceived, to be comforted, to be commanded. And the one who understands this truth commands not only the crowd, but the direction of history itself. The greatest weakness of the crowd is its hunger for certainty. For certainty is the illusion that calms the storm of doubt. The ruler who provides certainty, even in lies, will always be preferred over the ruler who offers truth tangled in hesitation. People do not ask whether the compass is accurate. They ask whether it points somewhere. Thus, the leader who points firmly commands the march, even if the direction leads into abyss. Fear must never be abandoned, for it is the foundation of loyalty when affection collapses. Affection is fleeting, fragile, easily corrupted by rumor or envy. Fear is steady, predictable, and far more enduring. It is not cruelty that sustains a ruler, but the wise distribution of fear, enough to inspire obedience, not enough to ignite rebellion. This is a balance learned not in books, but in the theater of survival, where every hesitation is an invitation to be devoured. The crowd does not forgive weakness, though it demands compassion. It despises those who kneel too quickly, even as it begs for mercy. The ruler must know when to grant reprieve and when to strike, for both mercy and punishment are instruments of control. A punishment delayed may lose its force. A mercy granted too easily may lose its value. Each act must be weighed not by morality but by consequence, For in consequence lies the true measure of power. The mask is indispensable. The ruler must never reveal the chaos within, for the crowd does not respect uncertainty. Appear calm while you scheme. Appear righteous while you deceive. Appear reluctant while you conquer. The mask protects not by hiding weakness, but by embodying the image the people crave. To drop the mask is to surrender to the crowd's judgment, and their judgment is merciless. The most skillful deceiver is the one who convinces even himself that the mask is real. Conflict is inevitable, and it must be cultivated, not erased. A people without enemies grows restless, turning its energy inward against the state itself. External threats, real or imagined, channel discontent outward, unifying those who might otherwise revolt. The art of rule lies in knowing when to intensify the fear of the external and when to soothe it, creating a cycle of dependence upon the authority that claims to shield them. Without enemies, rulers grow vulnerable. With enemies, they are indispensable. Wealth alone cannot secure power, for wealth breeds arrogance, and arrogance breeds downfall. Wealth must be converted into influence, and influence into loyalty. The ruler who surrounds himself with those who fear losing his favor holds a stronger fortress than any castle of stone. It is not gold that guards the throne, but the ambitions of men who tie their survival to the survival of their master. Thus, patronage is not generosity, it is the binding chain of necessity. History does not honor the most virtuous, but the most effective. Those who clung to purity vanished, those who adapted endured. The crowd remembers victors, not martyrs, for survival sanctifies itself. A ruler must decide whether he desires admiration in words or permanence in power. Rarely can both be had, and more often admiration is the grave of authority. To endure, one must choose utility over glory, necessity over virtue, cold calculation over warm ideals. In the end, the ruler must walk alone, for no one shares the weight of command. Allies may cheer, servants may flatter, crowds may worship, but the final judgment falls on the one who dares to hold power. It is a solitude sharper than exile, for even among thousands the ruler's thoughts remain his own, his burdens unseen. Yet it is in this solitude that clarity emerges, the recognition that power is not freedom, but a chain chosen willingly, a yoke that demands constant vigilance. To govern is to see humanity not as it pretends to be, but as it is envious, fearful, ambitious, forgetful. To shape these instincts into obedience is the true art, the art concealed from the many, whispered only among those who dare to command. This is the secret they do not want revealed. The crowd is not free. It has never been free. It will never be free. It is a sea waiting for a hand to carve its waves into direction. Those who understand this truth do not ask permission to rule. They rule. Power thrives not in abundance, but in perception. A ruler may have little at his disposal, yet if he projects strength, if he surrounds himself with symbols of permanence, if he commands with the voice of inevitability, the people will believe him invincible. Conversely, a ruler may possess vast resources, yet if he falters in display, if he hesitates in command, if he allows doubt to seep into appearances, his downfall is already written. In politics, reality matters less than the illusion that reality is secure. The crowd is nourished by stories more than bread, for hunger of the stomach can be pacified, but hunger of the mind is endless. Give them a narrative, and they will endure hardship for generations. Deprive them of meaning, and they will revolt even in prosperity. The ruler must therefore weave myths that justify his reign, myths that anchor obedience not only in the present, but in the fabric of destiny. Myths of origin, myths of protection, myths of salvation, all serve as chains disguised as faith. Every alliance is temporary. Friends of today will become rivals of tomorrow, and rivals may become allies when circumstances demand it. A ruler who believes in permanent loyalty is already deceived. The wise ruler treats every ally as a tool, useful until it becomes dangerous, necessary until it becomes expendable. Trust in politics is not faith, it is calculation, and betrayal is not a question of if, but of when. Manipulation is not cruelty but craft. Just as a sculptor shapes marble by removing what is unnecessary, the ruler shapes the crowd by withholding truths that would weaken resolve. To reveal everything is to surrender control, for transparency is a luxury of the powerless. The people do not want naked truth. They want truth dressed in forms they can admire, fear, or worship. To manipulate is not to lie for pleasure, but to govern through necessity, to preserve order in a world that would collapse under honesty. The machinery of control must always remain unseen. The more the people perceive the strings, the less they believe in the performance. Appearances must be maintained as though events unfold naturally, as though order arises spontaneously, as though obedience is chosen freely. Behind the curtain, the ruler directs the script, but on the stage, the people must believe themselves to be the authors of their fate. The hidden hand commands most effectively when it convinces the crowd it does not exist. Ambition without patience destroys itself. To seize power too soon, without consolidating the instruments of fear, loyalty, and narrative, is to build a fortress on sand. The wise ruler knows that time itself is a weapon, that delay can be as deadly as action. Waiting for the moment when the enemy is unguarded, when the people are desperate, when allies have no choice but to submit, this patience transforms ambition into inevitability. Exile is the silent tutor of rulers. Stripped of position, one learns who is truly loyal, who is merely opportunistic, and who is always waiting to betray. Exile exposes the fragility of appearances, the fickleness of the crowd, the cruelty of fortune. Yet exile also refines, for it teaches that survival is not the absence of power, but the preparation for its return. The one who endures exile returns sharper, colder, more resolute, armed with the memory of abandonment and the clarity of necessity. Power cannot be shared equally, for equality dilutes command. Councils, assemblies, and voices of the many may appear to guide, but true direction always comes from one. The fiction of collective rule comforts the crowd, but decisions of consequence are never made by multitudes. They are made in solitude, behind closed doors, where compromise ends and command begins. The crowd may chant the illusion of democracy, but its destiny is still written by the few who dare to decide. Thus, the architecture of control is built not on idealism, but on the cold study of human nature. Fear, envy, ambition, and desire, these are the bricks. Ritual, illusion, punishment, and reward, these are the mortar. The edifice rises not because it is just, but because it is necessary. And those who inhabit it believe themselves free, even as they walk corridors designed to keep them obedient. This is the unspoken truth of politics. Control is fragile yet enduring, hated yet desired, condemned yet indispensable. The ruler who grasps this truth sees beyond illusions, beyond morality, beyond the cries of the crowd. He knows that leadership is not service but survival, not virtue but calculation, not destiny but the will to command. And once this truth is seen, it cannot be unseen. Violence is not the opposite of politics, but its shadow. Where persuasion fails, violence confirms authority. It does not need to be constant, only remembered, for the memory of punishment lasts longer than the pleasure of reward. A single execution performed with spectacle can silence thousands more effectively than endless promises. Violence is most effective when rare, precise, and wrapped in necessity, so that the people believe it not cruelty, but the natural correction of order. The ruler must also know restraint, for excess brutality breeds not fear but desperation, and desperation turns men into weapons that even power cannot contain. Balance lies in using terror as medicine, not as feast. The hand that punishes must also be the hand that protects, so the people remain bound in contradiction, fearing and needing the same authority. This contradiction is the foundation of stability, for when the people cannot decide whether to hate or to love, they choose obedience instead. Fortune cannot be trusted, but it can be anticipated. Luck may raise a man, but only skill preserves him. To rely upon fortune is to build on shifting sand, but to deny its existence is folly. The ruler must treat fortune as an enemy to be outwitted, a storm to be navigated, a force to be resisted. Those who prosper are those who prepare for misfortune, who build reserves in times of abundance, who strengthen walls in times of peace, who treat every calm as the silence before the inevitable strike. Deception is not an aberration in politics, but its language. Words are not weapons of truth, but instruments of influence. To govern is to speak in tones that resonate with the instincts of the people, not with the logic of philosophers. Promises are tools, not bonds. Oaths are performances, not chains. The ruler must understand that words are not to be believed, but to be used, not to reveal, but to conceal, not to bind himself, but to bind others. Ruthlessness must never be confused with recklessness. The reckless man destroys himself by excess. The ruthless man endures by discipline. To be ruthless is to cut swiftly where hesitation breeds danger, to remove threats before they mature, to act decisively even when others waver. It is not the love of cruelty, but the recognition that in politics, hesitation is the most fatal indulgence. Those who act with ruthless clarity survive, while those who cling to hesitation become lessons for their successors. Every ruler is both actor and audience, for he must observe himself as carefully as he observes the crowd. He must know when his gestures inspire fear, when his silence commands respect, when his presence alone creates loyalty. The stage of power is unforgiving. A stumble may appear weakness, a pause may appear doubt, a misstep may invite rebellion. Thus, the ruler must practice his own performance as relentlessly as he crafts the performance of the people. The people speak of justice, but what they desire is order. They endure injustice daily if it preserves their safety, but they revolt when disorder threatens their sleep. Justice is a word rulers use to cloak necessity, a banner waved to legitimize decisions already determined by survival. The wise ruler does not seek justice for its own sake, but uses it as mask and instrument. For in the realm of power, justice is not truth, but utility. History itself is a weapon. Control of memory shapes control of destiny. What is forgotten can no longer inspire rebellion. What is glorified can rally generations. The ruler who controls history controls the framework within which the people understand themselves. Statues, ceremonies, anniversaries, and textbooks are not passive recollections but active instruments of command. The dead are enlisted into service, their images bent to sustain the living order. Thus, the past is never past. It is the raw material of rule. Power does not forgive weakness, but it also does not forgive arrogance. The ruler must learn humility as mask, never as surrender. Appear modest, so envy does not sharpen its knives. Appear cautious, so enemies underestimate. Appear reluctant, so obedience seems voluntary. True strength is hidden beneath this cloak, revealed only when decisive action strikes. Those who mistake appearances for truth fall prey to their own illusions, while those who understand the mask wield both humility and power as twin blades. The essence of command lies not in force alone, but in inevitability. The crowd must believe that resistance is useless, that authority is natural, that the ruler's presence is as fixed as the rising Sunday. When power feels inevitable, obedience follows without question, and rebellion withers before it begins. To create this inevitability is the final task of the ruler, to weave fear, myth, violence, and ritual into a force that appears not constructed, but eternal. When this illusion holds, power ceases to be contested and becomes destiny itself. The foundation of command is attention. For what the people do not see, they soon forget. Power must be displayed, not hidden, for invisibility breeds irrelevance. Appear in moments of triumph, appear in times of crisis, appear even in gestures of ordinary life, so the crowd feels your presence as constant. To vanish is to invite speculation, and speculation grows into rumor, and rumor grows into weakness. The ruler must master presence as much as absence, ensuring that silence itself becomes a form of speech. Enemies must never be underestimated, even when they seem small or insignificant. A single whisper can erode the pillars of authority if left unchecked. Suppress opposition not when it is strong, but while it is still forming, for it is easier to strangle a spark than to fight a blaze. Yet one must also learn which enemies to tolerate, for the presence of minor dissent strengthens the illusion of freedom while distracting attention from greater plots. The art is not in eliminating all opposition, but in controlling the range and direction of its expression. Control is rarely absolute. It is instead a balance of competing forces held in suspension. A ruler must learn which tensions to encourage and which to restrain, which rivalries to nurture and which to destroy. Too much unity creates suspicion of tyranny. Too much division creates collapse. Thus, the ruler cultivates both harmony and discord, weaving them together so that neither overwhelms the other, but both serve the permanence of command. Power decays without renewal. What is taken for granted loses its awe, and what loses awe loses obedience. Ritual is therefore necessary not as tradition but as reinforcement. Festivals, victories, speeches, and ceremonies remind the crowd of who commands, of what myths hold them together, of why they must obey. These repetitions sustain the illusion of permanence. Without ritual, authority fades into routine. With ritual, routine becomes sacred. A ruler cannot govern through reason alone, for reason convinces only a few. Most are governed by instinct, by desire, by fear, by imitation. To ignore this truth is to build a palace on foundations of air. The wise ruler addresses the instincts first, satisfying hunger, inflaming pride, directing envy, soothing fear. Once instincts are pacified, reason can be tolerated, but never before. The mind of the people follows the stomach and the heart, not the reverse. Symbols are the language of the crowd, and every ruler must become fluent in them. A flag, a gesture, a word, a uniform. These command more obedience than the most intricate argument. Symbols compress meaning into simplicity, and simplicity moves armies. The ruler who invents symbols creates identity. The ruler who masters symbols controls destiny. Even defeat can be transformed into triumph if wrapped in the right symbols, for the crowd remembers images long after it forgets facts. Fortresses of stone protect little if the fortress of perception collapses. Walls fall when soldiers lose faith. Armies break when their cause dissolves. The strongest defense is not in masonry, but in the conviction that the ruler is unshakable. Conviction can outlast sieges, inspire sacrifice, and bind men to their posts even unto death. Thus, the ruler must invest more in belief than in battlements, more in loyalty than in weapons, more in perception than in force. No ruler escapes the burden of hypocrisy. He must speak of virtue while practicing necessity, preach of unity while sowing division, praise freedom while enforcing obedience. This is not corruption, it is survival. The crowd does not require consistency, only reassurance. They will forgive contradictions if given spectacle, forget hypocrisy if granted stability, ignore deceit if supplied with myths. Hypocrisy is not a failing of rulers, but the foundation of rule itself. To endure is greater than to conquer, for conquest is momentary, but endurance is eternal. Many seize power in flashes of violence or fortune, but few preserve it beyond the moment. Endurance demands foresight, patience, cruelty tempered by mercy, deception blended with truth, spectacle sustained by silence. Endurance is the true test of rule, for history remembers not those who merely seized power, but those who shaped generations under its weight. In the end, politics is not the triumph of ideals, but the choreography of necessity. The ruler stands at the center of forces he cannot fully control, yet by skill he bends them into patterns that appear deliberate. His art lies not in eliminating chaos, but in arranging it, not in erasing human weakness, but in directing it. The crowd sees order where there is only design, stability where there is only balance, destiny where there is only will. And this, above all, is the secret of command, that what seems inevitable is always constructed, and what is constructed must be maintained with vigilance until the last breath. Obedience is strongest when it feels voluntary, and the ruler must master the craft of making submission appear as choice. The people must believe they participate in their own subjugation, that they endorse the very chains that bind them. This is achieved by granting them gestures of influence, minor decisions, trivial victories, symbolic freedoms, while reserving all matters of true consequence for the center of command. In this way, they exhaust their energy in illusions of power, while the real levers remain untouched. The crowd hungers for leaders who mirror their desires, not those who challenge them with truth, to reflect their fears, to echo their prejudices, to embody their hopes. This is the language that secures devotion. The ruler who tries to elevate the people beyond themselves will be rejected, but the one who amplifies what already dwells in their hearts will be embraced as savior. This is why appearances outweigh substance. The ruler must become the mask the people long to wear. Fate favors the bold, yet boldness without calculation is suicide. A ruler must know when to strike and when to wait, when to feign weakness and when to display strength, when to gamble and when to retreat. Boldness is not recklessness, but timing sharpened into action. Fortune bends to those who impose will upon it, but she destroys those who rush at her blindly. The true master of power advances like a predator, silent, patient, certain, and when the moment comes, he devours without hesitation. Secrecy is the shield of authority. To reveal intentions too early is to invite resistance. To expose strategies is to arm enemies. The ruler must veil plans in ambiguity so that no one can predict the next move. Mystery breeds awe, and awe breeds submission. The unknown inspires more fear than the known, and thus secrecy is not weakness but a form of strength. Let the people guess, let rivals wonder, let allies remain uncertain, for in uncertainty lies control. The ruler must also master sacrifice, for no power is secured without loss. Allies must be discarded when they grow dangerous, promises broken when they become burdens, principles abandoned when they threaten survival. The crowd calls this betrayal, but it is necessity. Better to sacrifice a limb than to lose the body. Better to abandon a friend than to surrender the throne. The ruler who hesitates to sacrifice will soon find himself sacrificed by others. Control of speech is control of thought. What words the people are allowed to hear, what ideas they are permitted to discuss, what stories they are encouraged to repeat, these shape the boundaries of their imagination. To govern language is to govern reality, for men rarely think beyond the terms they possess. Censorship is not merely prohibition but construction, building the very framework within which obedience appears natural. Thus, whoever shapes words shapes destiny. Power is tested not in times of peace, but in times of crisis. Calm waters conceal weakness, but storms expose it. The ruler who survives crisis emerges stronger, sanctified by necessity, clothed in the legitimacy of survival. Yet the ruler who falters, even once, finds his authority eroded beyond repair. Crisis is both danger and opportunity, and only those with clarity of will can transform it into a stage upon which their permanence is confirmed. The crowd despises contradictions in others, but tolerates them in power if cloaked with confidence. To be uncertain is fatal. To be wrong yet decisive is forgivable. The people do not demand infallibility, only consistency in appearance. They will excuse failures if convinced they are part of a larger design, but they will never forgive the image of hesitation. Thus, the ruler must act always as if guided by certainty, for the crowd cannot distinguish between conviction and illusion when both are performed with force. The nature of man does not change, and therein lies the ruler's advantage. Across ages, empires, and nations, men remain driven by the same instincts: fear, ambition, envy, greed. To understand these instincts is to understand the mechanics of command. Technology may evolve, borders may shift, laws may multiply, but the essence remains untouched. The ruler who grasps this truth governs not a generation, but the eternal pattern of human behavior. So it is that the architecture of control is less invention than recognition. It is not built from fantasies of justice or dreams of equality, but from the raw materials of human nature. Those who deny this are broken by it. Those who embrace it bend it to their will. The crowd will never admit it, for to admit it is to confess their chains. But the ruler must know it without illusion. Men do not truly seek freedom, they seek comfort within captivity, and the one who masters this knowledge writes the script of history. Every throne is surrounded by shadows, and in those shadows move the ambitions of others. Ministers, generals, merchants, priests, each seeks to extend his own reach beneath the canopy of power. The ruler must learn to play them against one another, to prevent any single hand from reaching too far. Division among the powerful preserves unity at the center, for when rivals contend, the sovereign remains the necessary arbiter. To trust any man completely is to invite usurpation. To make them dependent on the throne is to ensure survival. Fortune raises some men by accident, but accident alone cannot sustain them. Without discipline, fortune deserts as quickly as she arrives. Discipline is the silent companion of command, the habit of foresight, the restraint of impulse, the cold refusal to surrender to passion. The crowd indulges desire. The ruler must master it. Those who cannot master themselves cannot hope to master others, for authority begins not in command over armies, but in command over the self. Beneath every display of loyalty hides calculation. Allies remain faithful so long as their interest aligns with yours. Servants obey so long as obedience profits them. Even affection is corrupted by advantage, for men love those who advance their fortunes and abandon those who threaten them. The wise ruler does not lament this nature but exploits it, ensuring that the prosperity of others depends upon his own. As long as they cannot imagine survival without him, loyalty endures. The crowd does not crave truth but certainty dressed as truth. They will embrace contradictions if spoken with conviction, and they will denounce reality if it threatens their illusion. The ruler must understand that perception is stronger than fact, and that the weight of an idea lies not in its accuracy, but in its repetition. What is repeated becomes real, and what becomes real commands obedience. The battlefield of politics is not only in streets and palaces, but in the imagination of men. Silence is as powerful as speech. To say nothing at the right moment can terrify more than 1,000 proclamations. Uncertainty breeds caution, and caution preserves authority. The ruler who speaks endlessly dissipates his power. The ruler who measures his words multiplies their weight. Each silence must be deliberate, each utterance calculated, each gesture designed to suggest that more lies hidden than revealed. In this way, the sovereign becomes not merely a man, but a mystery, and mystery is half of dominion. The cycle of power is endless. Rise, consolidation, decline, collapse, every order moves through these stages. The ruler cannot stop the cycle, but he can extend it, stretch it, slow its decay. He does this not by defying the nature of time, but by adapting, renewing the structures of fear and loyalty before they wither, shifting the myths before they fade, refreshing the spectacle before it grows stale. Survival depends not on freezing power, but on keeping it alive through transformation. Enemies are more useful alive than dead when their existence sustains unity. A crushed rival is forgotten. A lingering enemy justifies vigilance. The ruler must calculate carefully whom to destroy and whom to preserve, for not all threats are equal. Some must be eliminated swiftly, others kept alive as warnings or as scapegoats. To destroy all opposition is to leave the people restless, with no focus for their unease. To preserve a chosen enemy is to channel their anxiety into obedience. Even the most powerful ruler is bound by appearances. He may act with cruelty, but cruelty must be cloaked in necessity. He may enrich himself, but enrichment must be cloaked in service. He may manipulate, but manipulation must be cloaked in protection. The people endure what they believe they understand, and they resist what appears naked and unmasked. Appearances are not ornaments of rule, but its substance. For in politics, what is seen outweighs what island. The ruler's greatest weapon is inevitability. When the people believe that no alternative exists, when rivals despair of success, when allies see their survival tied unbreakably to his, then power ceases to be contested and becomes the natural order. To cultivate inevitability is to erase choice, to dissolve resistance, to bind the future into the image of the present. And when this point is reached, the throne no longer needs to be defended. It defends itself through the submission of all. Thus, the essence of mastery lies in seeing men not as they dream, but as they are. To command is to manipulate envy, to channel fear, to distribute hope, to craft spectacle, to balance cruelty and mercy with precision. It is a lonely knowledge, for few dare to admit it, and fewer still to wield it. But in that knowledge lies the only true security of power, the architecture of control hidden beneath the stage of appearances, the silent machinery that moves nations while the crowd believes itself free. The ruler must always remember that human memory is short, and gratitude fades faster than resentment. The favors bestowed are quickly forgotten, but the smallest wound is remembered for a lifetime. Thus, rewards must be given sparingly and strategically so that their weight lingers, while punishments must be calculated to impress upon the mind a sense of permanence. It is not the quantity of actions, but their impact that sustains obedience. A single unforgettable act of discipline may achieve what 100 rewards cannot. Time is both ally and enemy. Delay can strengthen position or erode it, depending on whether it is used to consolidate or to avoid. To wait with preparation is strategy. To wait with fear is weakness. The ruler must read the rhythm of events as a general reads the battlefield, moving not too soon to risk disaster and not too late to forfeit advantage. The mastery of timing is the mastery of politics, for moments once lost never return. Men are governed more by appearances of justice than by justice itself. They do not measure fairness in principle, but in spectacle. If punishments seem equal, if rewards appear deserved, if law looks impartial, then the people will submit even when substance contradicts the image. The ruler must therefore care less about true justice than about the visible performance of justice, for it is performance that secures stability. What the people believe they see outweighs what they cannot discern. The hand of command must always remain steady. To show anger is to reveal vulnerability. To show desperation is to reveal weakness. To show indulgence is to invite exploitation. Emotions must be tools, never masters. The ruler may display anger to intimidate, sorrow to gain sympathy, joy to inspire, but these must always be calculated, never uncontrolled. The crowd believes in passion, but passion in a ruler is dangerous. Coldness cloaked in performance is safer than sincerity laid bare. Wealth without order corrupts, and order without fear collapses. The state survives not by prosperity alone, but by the structures that bind prosperity to authority. A rich people without discipline grows arrogant and rebellious. A poor people without fear grows desperate and uncontrollable. The ruler must balance wealth and fear so that the one sustains loyalty and the other prevents excess. This balance is delicate, but once achieved, it makes a throne unshakable. The counsel of others must be heard, but never trusted completely. Advisors serve themselves first, and the ruler second, even when cloaked in loyalty. Their wisdom must be weighed, their motives examined, their influence contained. A ruler who depends blindly on counsel is ruled by those who advise him. Yet a ruler who ignores all counsel blinds himself. The art is in listening without surrender, in extracting value while denying control, in remaining the final mind upon which all decisions rest. Every system of rule requires enemies within, for without them vigilance dissolves. The exposure of conspiracies, real or fabricated, nourishes unity by reminding the people of dangers hidden in their midst. Purges, trials, denunciations, these serve not only to remove threats, but to reinforce the perception of constant danger, binding loyalty through shared fear. A state that ceases to remind its citizens of enemies invites them to imagine rebellion. The face of power must be adaptable, for rigidity breaks where flexibility bends. The ruler must learn to shift masks as circumstances demand: warrior in times of war, father in times of peace, priest in times of ritual, judge in times of disorder. The essence beneath remains constant, but the appearance must change to match the desires of the crowd. In this adaptability lies survival, for the people accept a ruler who reflects their needs even when he secretly pursues his own. Control is not maintained by suppression alone, but by guidance. To forbid everything invites resistance. To allow everything invites chaos. The ruler must open certain paths while closing others, steering the people as water is directed through channels. They feel freedom because they move, yet every motion has been predetermined. The illusion of choice is the strongest form of control, for it pacifies desire while preserving dominance. The secret of endurance lies in invisibility of design. The crowd must never feel controlled, never sense the architecture of manipulation that surrounds them. They must believe that their obedience arises from their own will, that their loyalty is their own virtue, that their submission is natural. The ruler who achieves this has transformed command into destiny, and destiny cannot be resisted. In this lies the perfection of power, when rule no longer feels imposed but inevitable. The fragility of power lies not in the strength of enemies, but in the complacency of rulers. The moment a sovereign believes his position secure, he begins to loosen his vigilance, and it is in that instant the ground shifts beneath him. Power is not a throne upon which one rests, but a blade upon which one balances, requiring constant awareness, constant recalibration, constant readiness to strike or retreat. To forget this is to invite downfall not from rivals alone, but from the silent erosion of one's own authority. The people are drawn to strength because it spares them from doubt. They will endure hardship under a ruler who appears unbreakable, yet they will abandon the most generous sovereign if he falters. Weakness breeds contempt, and contempt breeds conspiracy. Better to be feared for strength than pitied for weakness, for fear sustains obedience even when affection dissolves. The ruler must project inevitability, not only through action but through posture, through gesture, through the quiet force of presence. Hope is a useful tether, but it must never be allowed to reach fulfillment. The crowd must always see salvation on the horizon, close enough to walk toward, but distant enough never to arrive. When hope is achieved, expectations rise higher, and dissatisfaction follows swiftly. The ruler must learn to feed the people with fragments of progress, symbols of advancement, glimpses of reward, never so much as to satisfy, always enough to sustain. In this endless pursuit, obedience renews itself. Excessive transparency is poison to authority. To show the mechanics of power is to strip away its magic, to reduce awe into suspicion, to turn belief into calculation. The ruler must allow mysteries to persist, decisions to appear shrouded, motives to remain unseen. For men respect most what they do not fully understand, and they follow most loyally what they cannot fully explain. The architecture of command must be hidden within ritual, symbol, and silence, leaving the people to imagine far more than they are told. The crowd does not rise in revolt because of oppression alone, but because of humiliation. A people can endure chains if they feel dignity remains, but when dignity is stripped, even fear weakens. Thus, the ruler must oppress carefully, always cloaking control in respect, always allowing the illusion of honor. A man who feels recognized endures submission. A man who feels degraded becomes dangerous. The art lies in making obedience feel like respect and servitude feel like duty. No empire is sustained by goodwill alone. It is sustained by the careful mixture of fear and reward, deception and truth, spectacle and silence. Each element must be balanced against the others, for too much of one destroys the equilibrium. Fear without reward breeds rebellion. Reward without fear breeds arrogance. Deception without truth breeds despair. Truth without deception breeds defiance. The ruler survives by weaving these contradictions into harmony, ensuring that none overwhelms the others, but all together form a system that binds the people tighter than chains. The ruler must recognize that betrayal often comes not from enemies, but from those closest, for proximity to power breeds both ambition and envy. The trusted minister, the loyal general, the lifelong ally, these are the ones who most often covet the throne. To prevent this, the sovereign must rotate favors, prevent any single figure from growing indispensable, and ensure that all rivals compete for his approval rather than conspire against him. Divide those around you, and you multiply your own security. Even mercy, when used, must serve strategy. To forgive an enemy is to bind him with obligation, but to forgive too freely is to appear weak. Mercy is most powerful when unexpected, when it seems a gift rather than a habit, when it is extended to one and denied to another, so that both fear and gratitude grow together. The ruler who knows when to be merciful wields two weapons at once, the loyalty of those spared and the fear of those still vulnerable. The crowd demands myths larger than life, for myths allow them to make sense of their submission. They will see the ruler as chosen by destiny, protected by providence, endowed with qualities beyond the human. The ruler must encourage these illusions, never denying them, never correcting them, allowing the people to exalt him into something they cannot equal. For as long as they believe him touched by forces greater than themselves, they will never think to rival him. Thus, the craft of rule is not an exercise in morality but in survival, not a sermon of virtue but a discipline of necessity. The sovereign who masters fear, hope, spectacle, and silence governs not only bodies but imaginations, not only the present but the future. And in this mastery lies the truth too many refuse to see, that freedom is not the natural state of man, but a story told to pacify him, while the real machinery of power continues its work unseen, relentless, eternal. Every act of rule must be weighed, not by its intention but by its consequence, for history does not remember motives, only outcomes. The ruler may act with generosity and be condemned, or act with cruelty and be praised, depending solely on whether his actions preserve the state. Virtue and vice are masks worn by necessity, and the sovereign must learn to wear them interchangeably, untroubled by the judgments of those who live safely under the order he sustains. The crowd is never fully satisfied, for desire renews itself endlessly. Feed them and they demand more, protect them and they grow restless, honor them and they grow arrogant. A ruler must therefore temper indulgence with denial, shaping the people's expectations so they remain dependent without ever feeling fulfilled. To give everything is to breed ingratitude. To give selectively is to cultivate loyalty through scarcity. The art of rule is not in abundance but in calculated deprivation. Rumor is a sharper weapon than the sword, for it multiplies without command, spreading faster than armies move. The ruler must master rumor by seeding it, directing it, extinguishing it when necessary, but never ignoring it. Silence in the face of rumor is concession, while denial without force is weakness. The wise ruler uses rumor as smoke to conceal intentions, as fire to burn rivals, as wind to carry myths. Control the whisper, and you control the storm. Order cannot exist without inequality, for hierarchy is the skeleton of command. The crowd may speak of equality, but they do not live it. They crave leaders, heroes, figures to follow, scapegoats to despise. Equality dissolves into chaos. Hierarchy channels chaos into obedience. Thus, the ruler must never surrender to the illusion of leveling all men, but must instead arrange them into ranks, granting each a place, a function, a role. When men know their station, they remain contained. When they believe themselves equal, they become dangerous. Fear is not only a tool of control, but a shield against complacency. The ruler himself must never abandon fear, for fear sharpens vigilance, preserves caution, sustains discipline. To live without fear is to invite blindness, and blindness is the prelude to ruin. A sovereign who fears nothing sees nothing, while one who fears wisely perceives threats before they emerge. Thus, fear is not weakness, but survival, the silent companion of every enduring throne. Religion, belief, ideology, These are instruments as necessary as armies, for they provide the language through which obedience becomes sacred. A people who believe their submission is divine will endure burdens no army could enforce. The ruler must therefore protect faith not as truth but as function, for it binds the crowd with invisible chains stronger than steel. To dismiss belief is folly. To direct it is mastery. The enemy within is always more dangerous than the enemy without, for the internal traitor wears the mask of loyalty until the moment of betrayal. The ruler must constantly test, probe, and unsettle those closest, ensuring that none grow too comfortable in their proximity to power. Suspicion must never sleep, for complacency at the center of command is the opening through which daggers strike. Trust must be rationed like gold, and even then alloyed with doubt. Rebellion does not begin with weapons, but with words. Before swords are drawn, conversations change, whispers spread, hopes take shape. The ruler who listens carefully to the tone of the people hears the storm long before it breaks. To act early is to suffocate rebellion in the womb. To act late is to wrestle a beast already awake. The survival of power depends less on force than on foresight, on detecting unrest before it crystallizes into action. The ruler must always stand apart, for familiarity diminishes awe. The people may cheer a sovereign who mingles too freely, but they will not fear him, and without fear, respect erodes. Distance creates mystery, and mystery sustains power. Appear among the people rarely, and always in triumph, always in spectacle, always in control. Let them see enough to worship, but never enough to understand. The less they know of the ruler's true nature, the more they will imagine, and imagination is the most useful servant of authority. Thus, the architecture of command is built upon illusions crafted into necessity, appearances hardened into permanence, fear tempered into loyalty. The ruler does not govern men as they wish to be, but as they are, driven by hunger, vanity, envy, and pride. To confront this truth without illusion is to hold the key to survival. And those who hold that key do not merely rule, they shape the course of history, bending it to their will while the crowd mistakes their chains for destiny. And so the path of rule is not illuminated by virtue, nor guided by hope, but carved by necessity and sharpened by will. To command is to walk through solitude surrounded by multitudes, to carry burdens invisible to those who cheer and curse alike, to impose order upon a world that resists it at every turn. The sovereign must see men as clay, soft and malleable, shaped by fear, bound by ritual, enthralled by myth, never free of the instincts that betray them. To govern is not to liberate them from these instincts, but to harness them, to direct them, to transform weakness into structure and chaos into permanence. The end of every reign comes, for no throne escapes time, but the measure of power lies not in its duration, but in the depth of its imprint. Those who ruled with illusions of virtue vanish in silence, forgotten by the same crowd that once adored them. But those who ruled with clarity, with patience, with ruthless necessity, leave behind a system that outlives them, a shadow that endures when their body is gone. The people may not remember their name, but they will live inside the architecture they created, obey the myths they forged, march to the rhythm they imposed. This is the truth they will never confess aloud, that freedom is a story told to soothe, while power is the law that governs all things. The crowd does not want to be free, it wants to be guided. It does not crave truth, it craves certainty. It does not honor justice, it honors strength. And the ruler who sees this without illusion becomes more than a man. He becomes the axis around which the fate of nations turns. In the end, history belongs not to the dreamers or the virtuous, but to those who dared to command. Their names echo not because they were loved, but because they endured. And endurance is the only immortality allowed to mortals, the only victory that outlives time. Those who master the machinery of fear and loyalty, deception and necessity, are the ones who bend the course of the world. All others are forgotten, swallowed by the very crowd they failed to control. Thus, the final lesson is simple and merciless. Rule as men are, not as they claim to be. See them clearly, Act decisively. Balance cruelty and mercy as weapons of the same hand. Do not seek to be loved, for love dies. Do not seek to be just, for justice bends. Seek only to endure, for endurance is the crown of all rulers, the last defense against the erosion of time. And in endurance lies the one truth that cannot be erased, that power belongs forever to those who grasp it without hesitation, hold it without remorse, and wield it without illusion.